Expert Series. Today we're joined by the District Vice President of the Metro West Region with oversight for the Brampton District, Gio Bazile. Gio, welcome.
It's good to have you. It's good to talk to you again, Todd.
Yes, I am really looking forward to our conversation. We're going to be talking about what and how TD has changed to serve its customers better through this pandemic. Of course, this series is a series we've done about 24, 25 quick hit sessions that help our business community to better navigate through the immediate response, the recovery, and finding a way to thrive on the other end of this pandemic. Everyone can check out previous expert series interviews at bramptonbot.com/expert series. Of course, we have a reopening resources page as well, bramptonbot.com/reopening resources. And today, let's get ready. Our guest is one of the most affable, most accessible bankers in our region. It's been a pleasure to get to know Gio in his new role. Let me tell you a little bit about his background. He's had over 15 years of operational leadership experience with a number of financial institutions, MBNA, Bank of America. He had front line management roles with them. He took care of JP Morgan Chase, 5 years with them in leadership roles in credit card operations. He's been on the insurance side of financial business as well with Sun Life as a director of client solutions, client solutions innovation, responsible for over $8 billion in assets under management. He joined TD back in 2018. He was responsible there for the North American contact centers and also the credit card operations for TD and MBNA, and was the executive lead in its Ottawa site. And in this last year or so, as I say, he's been in this new role, which is a big job. I had no idea that TD has a book of business here in the Brampton district of over $14 billion. Wow, Gio, we're going to call you Deep Pockets here. That is really impressive, my friend. And I'm, you've got a Bachelor of Arts in Sociology from my alma mater, go Western, and an MBA from Queens. So I'm just so happy that you're able to join us today.
Yeah, thanks again for having me, Todd. I know you and I have built some great interactions in the past since I've come on board, and so it's a pleasure to be with you.
Yeah, I'd be remiss in not letting our viewers know that TD has been an amazing supporter of the economic development initiatives and the business development initiatives that the Brampton Board of Trade does. So it's just a pleasure for me to shine a little light back on what you're doing for customers. So let me get right to it. Tell me about what TD's been doing recently to help Brampton residents stay safe, how your customers stay safe while transacting at TD.
Yeah, so I think what's important to call out contextually is obviously the pandemic has played a factor and it has had an impact across the country, and particularly for all of our various financial institutions and our customers alike. And so we took a stand earlier on in the pandemic where we shut down 40% of our network, retail space, if you will, branches across the country. And so as it related to Brampton, that equated to about 11 branches that we actually closed temporarily, mind you, in an effort to really do our part to make sure that we could kind of mitigate community spread and risk. Over the last 2.5 months or so, I will say that we've been very progressive in terms of reopening the majority of those branches across the country, but including Brampton as well. And so we've gone from 11 branches to now, over the past 2 or 3 months now, up to 17 of our branches that are now open out of about 21 branches that we have that service Brampton altogether. I think, from a security features perspective, again, in our efforts to try and protect our customers and our colleagues, there's a few things that we've done, over that period of time. And so, that includes everything from controlled access to making sure that we can control the volume of people in the branch. We reduced our volume of staffing in our branches as well to abide by Ministry of Health guidelines. And then at the same time, we incorporated plexiglass and continue to really observe social distancing as much as possible in an effort to make sure, again, that as people were interacting with us, that we were protecting ourselves, but also protecting our customers as well. Now, granted, as of yesterday, we've had the mandatory masks that have now been certainly put in place by the City Council. And so we've been, of course, pleased to abide by that guideline. And so that's been in place for us now. And so that should further help to bolster our abilities to protect the employees, but also more important, equally as important, our customers. I think the last thing that I would just say is we've ramped up our technological capabilities. Knowing that, while we still have a good volume of customers that still are coming to our branches for traditional transactions, we've really ramped up our focus on making sure that we give people other solutions to be able to transact with us online, to do those same kinds of transactions where it makes sense. Outside of course, your traditional coming in for an appointment with your advisor, these capabilities have added tremendous value to our value proposition and how we support our customers. And that leads into everything from, being able to do a mortgage from beginning to end remotely, being able to actually have a meaningful conversation with our financial planners or wealth management advice specialists also remotely and through virtual conversations. And so those are things that we've been able to implement most recently that have enabled us to not only protect our customers and protect ourselves, but also making sure that our customers are getting different channels of effectiveness in terms of still getting the meaningful advice they're looking for.
Well, that's great, and I think that's very comforting as well. I want to drill down a little bit more into some of those digital transformations that you mentioned. But kudos to the bank for being a role model in terms of the social distancing, in terms of the plexiglass, not only protecting, not only making a safe environment for your customers, but also protecting your employees. And I know that you've boosted your sanitization and cleaning. Well, it's so important for businesses. Many of them have been without revenue or have had restrictions on their revenue for a number of months now. To whatever we can do together as a business community to make customers feel, or to build their confidence in coming back to our branches, coming back to our stores, employees coming back to the plant or our offices as well, is so important. I'm just going to mention for our viewers a website, an initiative that the Board of Trade has taken to help our corporate customers and our small business customers as well, called postpromise.com. POST is an acronym: People Outside Safely Together. And so many of the protocols that you've established at TD, we've joined with the Retail Council of Canada, the Building Owners Managers Association of Canada, to set up a standard, a self-declaration that businesses can make that, yes, we are social distancing. Yes, we have a policy where employees that are ill stay home. Yes, we're practicing, the etiquette of sneezing into our elbows and stuff like that. So I'll ask Christy to put that up in our children, and it's so great to see that TD is taking that lead. Now, the big challenge for a lot of businesses is that they've been finding innovative ways to deliver under these restrictions, and a lot of that has meant a digital transformation. So you hinted on that, Gio. Tell us a little bit more about what we can do virtually, online, on one click with your branches now.
Yeah, so happy to. So I think, as I mentioned earlier, the conventional wisdom would suggest that typically if you were looking to purchase a home, that you would have to go into your branch and have a conversation with a financial advisor to help you understand what steps you needed to take and go through the approval process and so on. I think as a result of some of our enhancements that we've incorporated, what that's enabled us to do in such a short period of time is we've been able to partner with our mobile mortgage specialists in a really meaningful way, to ensure that as we are taking on opportunities in which customers are asking for, certainly, or asking questions about purchasing new homes, that process is now kind of moved over to our mobile mortgage specialists, because they had the capabilities on hand remotely. And so that means that they're able to set up a conversation with a customer virtually. So similar to how you and I are interacting, they will use technologies like Zoom, but more so WebEx, if you will, where it becomes a conversation face to face to talk about their needs and wants, and particularly understanding their financial situations, and then of course being able to use the tools at their disposal that they would have otherwise been able to use while in person, to actually get a good assessment and understanding of what makes the most sense for them in terms of based on their cash flow, based on their assets, liabilities, where can they start to really figure out the right process for approvals in terms of the opportunities to purchase the home that they're looking for. And so you start from the beginning with that kind of conversation, which is done virtually, and then what happens is right to the end of that deal, if you will, we have capabilities that we refer to as e-signature that enables us to actually send the document directly to the customer, where they virtually sign and send back electronically, and that constitutes the actual confirmation or the approval of the deal, if you will. And so that's kind of an example in short form of what that experience looks like for customers, whereas they would have had to go into a branch, go in, physically sign, meet with someone. Now they can actually physically or virtually do it through e-signature capabilities on that front.
Well, that's a wonderful example. The pandemic has really meant a lot of disruption for folks, anxiety levels, stress levels, fears of safety and health that we haven't normally felt before. And you've really thought this through, enhancing your mobile mortgage capabilities, taking out those hassle points, making it faster, and not having to wait for approvals as well. I'm glad you mentioned the e-signature capabilities. We'd be remiss if we didn't talk about how empathetic your leaders have been, your frontline people have been when it comes to mortgage payments, participating, open for conversations for mortgage deferrals during the springtime and this time. So again, great role modeling by TD on both the making the process easier, less hassle, and faster, and empathetic to the reality of the economic situation.
And Todd, just to that point, what I would say, because you touched on something really important around options that customers have. Certainly we recognize that the pandemic has certainly had an impact in various ways, depending on where you're at on the spectrum. And so we know that many Canadians have had impacts in terms of either seeing employment disruption or have their income flows or their cash flows take a negative hit as a result of a reduction in income, that we're able to support them by providing them with options through our TD Ready Advice program that is designed to actually provide solutions around mortgage deferrals, also deferrals on payments on credit cards and line of credit products as well. And so, and now every situation is different, and our TD Ready Advice specialists that can be found online to our TD Ready Advice Hub, or by even interacting first with your financial advisor, who can direct you into that space. I think it's important to note that every situation is different, and they will provide personalized solutions to that particular customer who may be experiencing a bit of that disruption. But our intentions have always been clear in making sure that the advice that we provide and the tools that we have at our disposal and the options that our customers have in an effort to make sure that they are equipped to be able to handle the challenges that they're facing, particularly on the expense side, are there for them to use should they qualify for those.
That's great. I am going to put that in the chat room here, Gio. So it's called TD Ready Advice. Is that correct?
Yeah. So it just launched. I would say just recently, and so we have essentially a TD Ready Advice hub, if you will, where let me take a step back. So there's kind of three elements to it. So, our TD Ready Advice specialists are there at the ready for online conversations, but also over the phone to support customers as they're navigating through the financial challenges that we just talked about, right? And we recognize that providing online tools and personalized advice and providing information tips around budgeting, tips on expense management are also important topics that customers are thinking about. And so these relief programs, in addition to providing options on deferrals and debt financing options as well, refinancing options, have even provided support to more than 300,000 customers thus far.
Wow,
as a result of that infrastructure. So that's been a really good news story for us as well. The other element of Ready Advice is that it also has a proactive arm to it in a way where we actually have Ready Advice specialists that will actually be making proactive contacts and proactive calls to customers who we may identify that may be at most risk. Because we recognize that, particularly if you think about it from a Brampton at a micro level perspective with some of our the wonderful diversity that we do have, is we know that a proportion of our South Asian, Indigenous, and even Chinese Canadians are least likely to know where to turn to for advice during this time, based on a recent TD poll that we put out. And so, TD Ready Advice is a model that's designed to really provide that level of proactive contact and proactive advice in an effort to make sure that we're addressing these customers as they prepare to move out of this pandemic and crisis, but knowing that as the economy is starting back up, it may not be starting back up on a similar plane as everyone else is.
That's right.
And so it's important to make sure that we have an infrastructure there designed to support customers to understand what flexibilities, what extensions may still be required to make sure that our customers stay afloat.
That's impressive. That's really impressive, Gio, having that proactive component where you're seeking out customers. I know when March 17th rolled around, that's the first thing we did at the Brampton Board of Trade. Our team divvied up our core customers. We made over 500 calls in about 10 days, and you just asked the question, how can we help out, and were you aware of this resource, etc.
Right.
And I know customers appreciate that. I hear some great stories from TD customers about not only your agility, your approval times, but also, as I say, that empathetic and I think proactive nature as well. As we get into the fall, a couple of things. Mortgage deferrals may come due, and that may require more conversations with your banker, not necessarily difficult conversations, but sensitive conversations. And we're also anticipating there will be some sort of second wave with respect to a surge in cases. So this ties in really well. Our next expert series is next Tuesday at 1 o'clock. And one of the wonderful parts of my job here at the Brampton Board of Trade is how we can connect businesses. And TD has just done a wonderful job of supporting the whole ecosystem of businesses here in Brampton. And a local financial planner will be focusing on cash flow and advice on cash flow.
Right.
And I will make sure that he knows about your Ready Advice help and mobile mortgage service as well. So
Absolutely.
That's great. Tell me more about how would you describe the ideal relationship banking relationship with, perhaps a business person. Maybe they're a sole proprietor, so a lot of their business transaction is on the personal side
Mhm.
at your branches as well. What are the elements of, a really good, any tips you have there
Yeah.
on a very positive relationship with your banker?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a great question, Todd, and we do get a lot of those questions, especially given these circumstances and times. So, I do think there's a number of things to really take into consideration. And so, first and foremost, it really does start with making sure that you have a really good, strong, full assessment of your current finances. I think that helps dramatically. And so, understanding how your income has changed through this crisis. If it's stopped entirely, obviously it's going to have an impact on your cash flow. Understanding what your means or what your needs are versus your wants, because that will certainly drive your expense or your expenditures overall. And then understanding that if cash flow is an issue, as we've just talked about before, then knowing that you have resources at your disposal, whether it's interacting with your financial advisor to better understand what options you have, or reaching out to our TD Ready Advice Hub for additional support and understanding that. We talked about the notion of the concept of mortgage deferrals and of course deferments of payments as options, viable options. But it's really important to make sure that regardless of those circumstances, depending on where you are on the scale, right? Whether you're prepared or not prepared, or you've been saving, you haven't been saving, or you have income and you don't have income, you should always be prepared for the unexpected. Right? So understanding what your priorities are, not losing certainly context on what your long-term objectives are, particularly as you're thinking about retirement or perhaps purchasing a home or even trying to save for money for education for children, for kids down the road. Those are very important pieces to keep in mind. And I think what I would also say is, it's really important that you're also thinking about the fact that depending again on where you are on the scale, some customers may be in a position where they have enough cash flow where they're thinking about, well, it's about time to start paying down debt, focusing on that as an element, or they're looking at diversifying their savings. And also looking at perhaps direct investing options, particularly because we have seen fluctuations in the market that I think people want to take an opportunity to take advantage of in some cases. And so those are the kinds of conversations that we feel like we're having with consumers in the grand scheme of things. But it really does fall back on when you're meeting with your advisor. There's important elements to obviously to be mindful of, right? And so one of which is we talked about, which is understanding your financial situation, understanding your balance sheet, your assets, your liabilities, your mortgages, your credit cards, your pensions, TFSA, your insurance policies, and any tax information as well. You'll know that when you're meeting with your advisor, that your advisor will likely lead the conversation, which is important, but it's important to remember that it is meant to be an interactive conversation as well. And ask as many questions as possible around what the prospects are for 2021 and beyond. Is it time for me to invest? Is it time for me to pay down my debt? Those are all important questions to ask a financial advisor. And depending on how extensive that conversation can be, that's where that financial advisor can direct the right traffic for you to get you in touch with a financial planner. Right, or a private wealth specialist as well, which is a great kind of a kind of broad value chain that we have at TD to our various partnerships at the branch level with our One TD committee initiative. And so those are really important. I think the last thing that I would just leave you with, or maybe I think the 4 quick hits overall, if you're thinking about it from a consumer perspective, is revisit your budget. Understand kind of, again, your balance between your needs and your wants, and understand how those may have changed. Monitor your expenses. We have apps such as my TD Spend that can help you understand how to better transact, how to understand what your goals are, and they can help you monitor your expenses along your track towards your long-term objectives. keeping your long-term objectives in mind, as I mentioned earlier. And then, as I said, building a nest egg is very important. So always looking at ways to save so that you can always make sure that you have enough resources to be able to overcome or to address unexpected expenses as they arise.
Yeah, very, very good checklist. I've captured some of what you said in the chat room there, and I'm a former banker as well. And the number one tip for a good relationship with a banker: don't surprise them.
Right.
And
Right.
I think
Absolutely.
your checklist there is a good way to make the banker feel comfortable, and it gives you more confidence as a customer as well, that you are aware, and that helps the advisor help you the best. So great advice there, Gio. Gio, I see in our chat room we have a question from one of
Sure.
our attendees. What are the grant programs or funding open to nonprofit organizations? I know you're very involved in the community here in Brampton. Is there a dedicated branch contact who can help a nonprofit organization through grant process approvals? Can you comment on that?
There is. So we within our organization, of course, as you can imagine, it's a robust one, and so there are teams dedicated around providing or assessing investment opportunities, particularly in organizations that perhaps may not be non-for-profit, to your point. And so those resources do exist, and I can certainly pass on some of those contacts separately, after this meeting, to give you a sense, and perhaps you can share that with your audience. But I think what we've really focused our efforts more so on is, the implementation of our TD Ready commitment. And so this might be something that you might be aware of, something that we've really marketed at a large scale. And it's really designed through our TD Community Resilience Initiative around allocating funds towards supporting communities that are in need of localized support through community organizations, nonprofits, support for community regional banking support as well for local response, United Way. And so we've allocated as much as 25 million from a region perspective to focus on this effort. And then I think also when you take into consideration the fact that, especially in previous weeks, as you can imagine, with all the sensitive topics that have been brought up around anti-Black racism.
Yes.
That is something that's certainly very important and critical to TD's mantra as well. And so we've made a very meaningful investment of about $4 million to allocate to initiatives specifically addressing anti-Black racism and supporting initiatives that are designed around supporting Black communities themselves. So I would say that's kind of our toolbox, if you will, of how we operate in terms of making sure that we provide funding where it makes sense for us and where it aligns to our values. But yes, there is a structure in place, particularly also for organizations that are nonprofit, that of course includes an approval process, and, as you can imagine. But I think probably our biggest win from our vantage point is, and what we're most proud of, is the work that we're trying to do on the nonprofit side, specifically around TD Ready commitment initiative.
That's fantastic. I mean, I'm a little older than you. I'm a lot older than you, Gio, but I remember back in the 90s, we used to do strategic visioning and strategic planning sessions. And some of those were called Vision 2020, 2020 with the glasses, right?
Right.
Listen, I don't know that any of the plans that we did would ever have encompassed or envisioned a health crisis, an economic crisis, and a social crisis all happening at the same time in 2020. So I just want to reinforce for our viewers again, TD is a wonderful corporate role model. They thank you for outlining TD Ready commitment and your most recent overture into helping communities and helping businesses TD was the first, was the pioneer for the Brampton Board of Trade in establishing an annual investment plan to help with all of our economic development initiatives, be it our business, recognizing our Business Person of the Year, our Business Excellence
Right.
Awards, our View from the Top, the advice and advocacy that we give that can remove barriers for small businesses and corporations so that they can hire more people. And you set the standard, and a number of companies have come in. We got about 2-3 dozen now that support our efforts, and it all started with TD. So again, I can't say enough good things about the Toronto Dominion Bank. You know, we're coming up on 1:30. I see there. I was going to ask you, how do you differentiate yourself in the marketplace? I think you've done a darn good job of explaining that right now. Your proactivity, your agility, your approval times, your empathy in the communities. But what else? Anything else on your mind?
I mean, I will say, you know, I think all the things that we talked about and we mentioned earlier, I think certainly do differentiate us compared to perhaps our competitors, particularly the investments that we've made, particularly around thinking in a strategic way, or being forward thinking around, you know, where do we think our customers are going to be post-COVID, and what is that going to look like, and making sure that we have proactive programs like TD Ready Advice designed to support customers in a meaningful way. I think the only other thing that I would just say, you know, that may not necessarily be financially based or specific is the culture within the organization. And I know, Todd, you've obviously experienced some of that, but it's also the focus on diversity and inclusion.
Yeah.
And I think I bring that topic up because it's apropos given the circumstances that we're in. But the fact that our organization, and you may have seen some media presses from our CEO and our group head as well, really talk about the importance of making sure that there's an acknowledgement of that we all have a role to play around making sure that we're driving you know, the initiatives that are critical towards improving representation of people of color within the organization and around really, you know, the industry as a whole, particularly around, you know, looking at ways of developing their capabilities so they can also have a seat at the table as we kind of go forward. And so, you know, I think one of the things that really impressed me about TD when I first joined 2 years ago was precisely that, that it wasn't necessarily an organization that was, you know, talking the good talk, if you will, but was willing to put their money where their mouth is. And you think about all the programming that we've done, even just as recently as February with Black History Month. You know, also the primary focus on the LGBTQ2+ community, as well as our focus on the Indigenous community as well. You know, there's a lot of, and not to mention, we have a robust women in leadership program internally within the organization. And so, you know, when you think about differentiation, you also think about it from within in terms of how do you attract talent. And I do feel that since I've joined, I've been incredibly impressed with the level of focus, the level of passion that our more senior executives have possessed, and have really looked at building internal structures designed to ensure that the changes that we're aiming for are sustainable and long-term.
Well, that's fantastic, and it shows. It shows that TD is living its values. You know, I remember you were one of the pioneers again in supporting TRIAC, the Toronto Region
Right.
Immigrant Employment Council, that a lot of employers are involved in, and their mentoring programs as well. That's fantastic, Gio. You know, Brampton itself, as a city, as a regional economy, we're not only the youngest workforce in Canada, but pretty much the most diverse as well. There are more languages spoken in our community than in the city of Toronto proper. So that is our comparative advantage, and to have corporate leaders like you that live the values of diversity and inclusion. I know it's central to our economic development recovery strategy here as well, and let's just keep going. I think the next 15 years and then some belong to Brampton if we all work together. Well, this has been a delightful conversation, Gio. Thank you again for your preparation, for your time here today. We look forward to interviewing other parts of the bank, other colleagues of yours in small business banking, commercial, as well as the summer months, and we get into the fall as well. I will let our viewers know of a couple of important upcoming ones. I mentioned Tuesday at 1 o'clock, we've got Stephen Stashen and Stephanie Holmes Winton. They're speaking about coming up for air, practical strategies for financial breathing room. I've seen the presentation. It is very practical. It'll dovetail nicely with some of the themes that we've discussed with Gio today. So that's 1 p.m. on Tuesday, July 21st. That's next week. On the 22nd and every Wednesday, 8 a.m., we have Wake Up Wednesday. And I make sure I get a couple of coffees in me. And it is just a wonderful, focused conversation about some of the opportunities that businesses have. How do we work together to capture them? What are some of the challenges that we're having? We try to connect people, suppliers to customers, insights. It's only an hour. It's very focused. You'll learn a lot about the trends that are happening in various sectors. You'll learn a lot about our city and how it's developing as well. So that's on the 22nd. July 28th, we have an AMA. What's that? That's an Ask Me Anything. But the Ask Me Anything is going to be directed at our most dynamic mayor, the mayor of Brampton, Patrick Brown, as well as the chair of the Brampton Board of Trade, Vanessa White. AMA, Ask Them Anything. Maybe it's ATA, I don't know, but you're not going to want to miss it. It's July 28th, it's 8 a.m. And then we have the Minister of Transportation, the Ontario Minister of Transportation, Minister Mulroney, Caroline Mulroney, will be joining us on August 6th, again, 8 a.m. We like to get all our, start your day off right, get all the good stuff in before 9 o'clock, and she's going to be talking about a number of things that are going to help our economy. Two-way all-day go, the GTA West Highway, and other investments in transit and transportation. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for your attention today. Gio, thank you so much. I look forward to the next time we see each other. Absolutely. And I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of day and rest of week. We'll see you again soon. Take care now.
Thanks for having me. Take care.